provided to him, I guess, as well as this document.
Thank you for that. And this is a practice from municipal governments and governments in general. And I said that I talked about this last night, and I won't make any apologies for this because what we're doing essentially is protecting the interests of taxpayers. The information that is not there is a narrow band of information. It's not the whole book. It's not the whole, by any means. It is a narrow band of information that goes to the heart of the operations of the city of Regina. And to release that information to competing interests would make an unbalanced response to the request for proposal. One could have an advantage over another, and that would not be in the interest of taxpayers. So I want to give you an analogy to make it clear here. If you're negotiating a collective agreement, as Mr. Holmes has done before, or anybody does that, you're negotiating, you don't put all your cards on the table right away to say, here's the best deal for you, take it. You protect the interests of those people who you represent. So we're going to protect the interests of taxpayers the best way we can. This information would not be available in a design bid build, or a design bid, or a P3, or any other variation. Because we want a level playing field so that those companies responding to the RFP cannot take advantage of another one, and understand very intimately the operations of the city and maybe find a weakness or a flaw that they can exploit, and we pay for it as taxpayers. I will not have put taxpayers at risk, have them paying more money than they ought to. I mean, no apologies for it. We won't do it for any other form of funding, and most governments wouldn't do it anyway. So I hope you understand that. It's a business decision to protect the interests of taxpayers, and Council knows of this and support it. Every 11 of us agree to that. So I'll always, first and foremost in mind, protect the interests of the taxpayers and the citizens of Regina, first and foremost.
And just the second part of that question, and Mr. Holmes, if you could, that makes sense, thank you, Mayor. Could you list, say, 3 things that you would like to know that if you can't get information on, that would not be in the, would be in the best interest of those taxpayers?
Well, this has been quite an extraordinary couple of days, these debates, because we have been asking for this information on what's this interest rate spread. You know, how large do you think it's going to be the ballpark? High, low, medium. We asked for that in March, and we didn't get it. Got those blank pages we've been talking about ever since. We went to council, talked about it. Then we were told by the city that we're going to release all the information. We've been released as the same blank pages. Now the mayor says he can't release those numbers because that would compromise the bidding process. But he just told you. He thinks it's between 0.4 and 1.5%. That's the range. Now, so which story of the mayor's would you like to believe? The one that this information is so sensitive you can't release it, or the information he just released to you? You can't believe both. So that's the first point. Yeah, quite frankly, these numbers don't make any sense to us, and we've talked to economists about it. The one explanation that comes with it, I want to just be clear, this is sheer speculation, because the numbers just don't bear any resemblance to anything else, and once they don't bear any resemblance to the numbers that PPP Canada uses for these projects. But they say how you could get to this number is just the city is underwriting the loan, i.e. the city's co-signing. So any idea that the private company is going to be on the hook just disappears. It's like, you know, we co-signed a loan for our youngest son, right? And it's possible, I trust it, but it's possible at 63 years old I may be taking out a mortgage on my house again. I'm not very crazy about that idea, but it's going to happen. So that's the key thing. He talked about it wouldn't be available in a design bid build. Right? Now, I'm not an expert in these sorts of things, but I do know I've gotten bids for projects in my own home, and when I go out to get a bid on getting new shingles on my garage or getting a new driveway, I don't tell the contractors what I'm prepared to pay. I don't say, you know, I've got a line of credit that will go up to $2,500, so what do you want to charge me for my, you know, for the work? But in this one, the city said it's $234 million. That's what we're prepared to pay for it. So I think sort of the cat, in a sense, is out of the bag. But the difference, the real difference here is that we're proposing design bid build. This thing will be built by the private sector. It will be finished in 2016, which is within that time frame. And you know, the money will be available from Canada Builds 2 in that time frame, 2016. But it will be done, and it will have to be paid for then. And the relationship with that private company is over. So what their borrowing rate is for those 3 years of construction is part of the cost of getting it built. But it's not a continuing liability for the city. And that's the problem with this one, because we're signing up with this company, they're borrowing the money in our name, we're gonna pay back through our sewer taxes, their borrowing rates, and their profit, and we're gonna pay that back for that operation of that plant for 30 years. And that's again what the British Treasury says. That's why it doesn't make sense. They say there are no efficiencies in P3s that outweigh those higher borrowing costs. So again, I mean, it's like numbers, I mean, it's, but, sorry, I don't get to look at that, that wasn't very polite. I don't understand why. I don't understand why, you know, why I can't just have that piece of paper to see what it says. And I can't understand why you can't have that, not the exact number, because no one knows if he's quite right, that will come out of the market and that'll be part of the bid. But just what kind of ballpark are we playing here? Because how much we pay in interest over those 30 years, that's the key. And that's where you get stung, quite frankly. The $58.5 million for the government, yes, lots of people are going to P3s and they're going into it because the federal government is telling us the only game in town. If you want access to the money your taxpayers have paid the federal government to build infrastructure in your town, you take it as a P3. You take that money and you turn it over to a private corporation over a long period of time. And for the politicians, for all of us, it's very attractive because we get that immediate influx of cash right at the top. We pay and pay yearly for it. And we also pay in terms of flexibility and in terms of the risks we run at that company when they're operating flat to our standards of 30 years.
So I got it from that, the interest, how the interest rate calculation that the mayor said would be between 0.5 and 1%, would you like to, that information you'd like to have?
Well, I mean, let me tell you the kind of numbers that we see. For example, you talked about Moncton. Moncton's older, but it was done as a P3 arrangement. So the analysis is that Moncton could have borrowed the money at a little under 6%. It was a while ago. They paid 10 for it. Okay, and they still pay for that. And the water rates in Moncton shot up after that, I think about 75%. And they are higher than the average water rates in the region in the country. So Moncton's paying for that process. That's a problem. The British Treasury, and this is 2011, because interest rates moved, they said, we think we can borrow money for 4%, as the government agreement for long term, which is roughly what the city's borrowing for, 3.818. But they say we think the cost of P3 funding is 8%, so basically double. Okay? So that's in 2011. But that's the British Treasury. They talk to these people, Price Waterhouse, and then people build these things. So that's the range you're talking about. PP3 Canada, they say 2% to 3.75%. They think is the higher, how much higher the private rate would be. Okay, so those are the ranges you're looking at. How the mayor gets from there to 0.4 to 1.5, he didn't explain to us tonight. He hasn't explained again, except these are big projects, these are big companies. So, I guess that's the question. But again, this is a number we have been asking for now for 5 months. And 1 week before the vote, the mayor plucks this number, 0.4 to 1.5. It's like the number they plucked out, $276 over 4 years. Right? Where do those things come from? Right? And that's what we want to know.
That number's been out there for a while, and actually it comes from Deloitte. That's been out there for a while, so I mean, I'm not sure you're asking for it, but that's certainly it. But I want to go to Moncton, because Mr. Holmes mentioned that. Moncton was a facility that was designed, built, and financed and operated by US Filter, it's called, for a 20-year term. The total cost of the project was $23 million. There's an estimated $10 million savings in the capital compared to a traditional way of $38.2 million. No staff layoffs. They have increased capacity. Their water quality is excellent, and they brought in new clients like Molson Fluid. So the point I want to make here is that you can cut this any way you want to. We can sit here all day and talk about, I don't believe you, I don't believe me, I don't believe you, but there's a big difference here. City of Regina Council is accountable to the public. Our reports are public. Our reports are there for people to look at. You as voters can make a choice. The Water Watch is not accountable to the public. You can talk about a bunch of information and say this is or isn't the case. There's no accountability. That's a statement of fact at face value. When we talk about interest rates, I'm not sure I follow the logic of Mr. Holmes. It is very clear what I said. This comes from Deloitte, a leader in looking at P3s, 0.5 to 1%. That's the average. But you cannot know the number until you go to market. That's when you want to buy a house You can plan to say, I want a 25-year mortgage, but I don't want to pay any more than 10% a year, or 8% a year, or 3% interest a year. But you don't dictate those terms. The market does it for you. So you can't say, in fact, it is this. The modeling says that's what it is. So the information that's redacted or withheld is narrow band of information that would compromise our interests as a city and taxpayers. And again, I'm going to repeat, I'm not going to compromise that. I'm going to protect taxpayers all the time. But we can go back and forth and talk about who's right and who's wrong here. But I want to talk about the facts, not the fear of what could happen. That we're privatizing water. That we're going to sell out the facility somehow. I mean, you look at the ads that are and you see in the paper that are out here. That those who are sort of casually looking at the information would see this. Vote yes to that our water is a vital resource that must remain public. We're not even talking about water. This is sewage. Our water system is completely different, as I say. So we talk about, we never don't talk about drinking water. We have this ad in the paper as well that has a girl drinking water. Now, if the public sees it, they may well say, we must be talking about drinking water. We're going to privatize it. Nothing of the sort. I stand by the integrity and competence and confidence I have in the city administration, my elected members of council that have gone for many, many months and years to protect the interests of the city. I stand by our numbers. We have accountability. What is over here is not accountable to the public. There's no way to accommodate that. Mr. Hugh McKenzie's report, the one level alone on interest rates, compounds it to show that we're going to spend $98 million more, or wherever the number is completely false. The premise is false. It is not looking closely at the issue. So it's up to you to decide who you believe. But I can tell you, beyond belief in the fear issue, the fact is that we will save taxpayers' money on this. The risk of building this and maintaining and operating it flows to the company responsible, not the taxpayers. That's the concept of the P3. That's why it's attractive. $58.5 million. If you walked away from that, taxpayers are ready to say, what were you thinking? You walked away from $60 million. What for? Because we don't like the money coming only because it's a public-private partnership? When it makes sense economically anyway? I can't defend that. So we say, let's not do it at all then. Let's just have a design bid build with all those flaws, those inherent flaws, no way to corral the cost. I can't defend that either. Sorry, I can't do it. Because the bill will be higher than this. You know, 70% of these projects go over budget. This is a significant risk for taxpayers. We've done our due diligence. We've done our homework. Trust the people you elected. That's why you elected them. To make these decisions on your behalf. And we'll find out. I'm absolutely confident we've done the right thing. Thank you.
So we just have 10 minutes left, and I'd like to invite Mr. Holmes to his closing summation.
So again, let's start from the basic premise. We need a wastewater treatment plant. It's an important part of our responsibility to future generations on the environment. That's not an issue. It will be built by a private sector company. The city doesn't have that capacity to build any infrastructure. Most governments don't. Almost all the stuff is done as bids. Let's be clear. Public sector projects do not come in over budget. If there's an over budget, it's because the private sector company that bid on it did not deliver on what it promised. Okay? Now, there may be very good reasons. I don't think one would put conspiracies to this. You know, there may be problems about material, there may be problems about labor shortages, there may be problems with weather, there may be problems with the client making changes. City of Yorkton made changes in its water treatment plant. And they said, we made a change because they came to us with a proposal to save us money, and we saved that money. So there are reasons to make changes. That's not a bad opinion. So that's the first issue. This going to be built by the private sector. The key issue you have to look at is the interest rates. Let me see if I can give you an analogy. You want to buy something. You want to buy a sofa. You go to the store and you say, how much for the sofa? And they say it's 25% off. You say, but, well, that's great. That's wonderful. But The catch is, you've got to accept the in-store financing. And you say, well, how much is the in-store financing? What's the interest rate on that? And they said, we can't tell you that. Well, is it higher than bank rate financing? I get a good rate from the bank. Well, it would definitely be higher than the bank rate. We can't tell you how much higher. That's our business model. Right? Would you buy a sofa like that? And that's exactly what the mayor's asked you to do. He says that you get 25% off from the federal government. No, he's a little shaky on the math of how that works out, but 25% off. But you have to go on the basis that you are not allowed to know what the interest rate you're going to be paying on this thing for the next 30 years is. And that's the key. That problem is the key in this whole system. So that's the first issue I would raise with you. It's a bad model, and again, that's the conclusion the British have come to, and they've backed off because they've run up huge debts with these things. The other problem, of course, we talked about was the inflexibility, because you're locking yourself into a 30-year contract, and what is a very uncertain thing. I mean, think about it. I mean, I grew up here, and I don't think there's anything more uncertain in Regina than how much it's going to rain in the summer, unless maybe it's how much it's going to snow in the winter, but they both come to the same thing. I do know that those glaciers in the Rockies are melting, and they are receding each year, and that is our key water source. So that's good. When we talked about this, when Marley Waser, the Environment Canada scientist who studied the Wascana system, talked to us, she said, you shouldn't even be saying wastewater. There is no wastewater. There is only water in this world. And it comes out of that plant. It has to be cleaned. It will flow downstream. And everyone has a responsibility to deal with that. Okay? Of course, we don't drink our own sewage water. Nobody does. Everybody pumps it down the system. But we each have a responsibility as we go down that system, a responsibility because we live on this earth for that water and what kind of stewards we are of it. And this idea that that's just sewage. We talked about what the British Medical Journal says about the importance of sewage, and the city just sort of brushes it off like it doesn't matter. Don't think about it. It's something dirty. It's something very important. So I guess that's the question, you know. And the other thing about this is a private company. It is governed by the rules of the market, and that's the issue. When Pierre Amel was here, he was saying the thing about these arrangements, these P3 arrangements, is you're going into a 30-year marriage. The woman who was selling it, it's like a marriage. You have this partnership. Right? You got a marriage, and he said, yeah, it is like a marriage. You've got a 30-year marriage contract. The only problem is you don't know who's going to be waking up in your bed tomorrow. Because that relationship, that partnership, that corporation can be sold, and they are bought and sold all the time. So that's part of the problem. You just don't know, but you're going in bed for 30 years from the other end. So I think those are the key issues you need to take a look at. You know, water is extremely important. It is essential to life. Okay, it is all part of the system. It's certainly different. And the second point, I guess you would say, is this deal does not make economic sense. It locks us into an inflexible arrangement and doesn't allow us to move with the changes in the environment.
Thank you again for the opportunity to talk about this important issue, and I'll talk about facts over fear. The public sector does not go over budget. We had a lab at the University of Regina that went over budget for $7 million because they had change orders. The government decided they wanted to change the design, change the capacity. Couldn't fund it in 1 year. I can't respond to that. The public sector doesn't always go over budget, but they do go over budget. They do. You know who's going to pay for that? It's going to be taxpayers again. Facts over fear. Interest rates. I can just repeat again that the interest rates are a range, and no one can know what those are until you go to market. The key issues to think about here is that the city will own and control through a contract and through setting of utility rates this facility for 30 years in this model. No question about that. But to say, on the one hand, the city will own it, but it's going to be privatized, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. You can't have those two statements go together. We own it and we control it. It can't be any more clear than that. Now, the rules of the market was used by Mr. Holmes. Part of the market, the rules of the market, is entering into a contract with government or someone else between partners. Public-private partnership, a contract. And if everybody does their due diligence, as we know we have, we'll protect the interest of taxpayers. Absolutely certain of that. This is not privatization. We own it, we control it. Issues of a secret deal for 30 years. The ads say it. The television ads talk about a 30-year secret deal. I want to tell you once again, that contract will be made public on the floor of council. It's not secret. All decisions made by council are in a public forum, and those documents are available for everyone to see. Again, facts, not fear. It's not a 30-year secret deal. Our primary interest as a council is to protect the interests of taxpayers. To look after you. You empowered us to do that. You asked us to do that. It's a sacred trust that every member of council believes very strongly and lives every day. We will always defend you, and we'll always look after the interests, and we're always looking for ways to provide more tax relief for you and expand our tax dollars, particularly for infrastructure, for partnerships. I'm asking you to vote no to a design bid bill because of all the inherent uncertainties of cost. The public-private partnerships, in this case only, will ensure in the best way to control costs and spread the risk back to the private sector and not on your shoulders, guaranteed. Thank you very much.